importantly for us, facilitator and colleagues, is that here are the anticipated outcomes. And what we did, we looked at what is the mandate of Salga. And here is part of our mandate, looking at developing common approaches, enhancing cooperation. And the most critical one for me is finding solutions for problems relating to local government generally. And I think today's webinar is a start of that engagement as we find solutions to problems or challenges that we're faced with as local government and as a sector collectively. So, Chair, that's the end of the outline of the program, including the anticipated outcomes. I wish to thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, William, for sharing the anticipated outcomes. This platform, finding solutions to speed up implementation. I think we've got very good plans and sometimes also good ideas in terms of technology, but we need to implement all these things to meet communities' needs. Thank you very much, William, for your talk there. Moving forward, I would like to invite Engineer Sugen Pillay to the podium. Engineer Pillay is the current Cesa President and Director at Sitolele Consulting. Engineer Pillay will be sharing his opening remarks regarding the webinar as we ponder on the question, what needs to be done better to restore and embrace engineering in the water and sanitation sector. Many thanks, our President, Engineer Pillay. You can present your talk.
Thank you. A very warm welcome again to each and every one of you esteemed guests on behalf of Cesa. And thank you for taking the time to join us this morning for this very important and critical conversation as to how we can move our water sector forward. I've just got a few opening remarks that I would like to share. So firstly, as we go through the discussions today, let us keep in mind that a national water and sanitation master plan has been developed for the country. I'm sure most of you would have seen it and are familiar with it. And if you have seen that master plan, it is supposed to be a roadmap for the future of how water infrastructure is going to be developed and maintained in the country. And obviously all of the other issues, the related issues that go with it. The plan has addressed what the challenges are and has made recommendations as what needs to be done to address those challenges. But very importantly, the detailed implementation will then depend on the local authorities and the water services authorities as to how they interpret that master plan and how they implement and make that plan relevant to their local circumstances. So I think that's very critical. And as we go through the discussions, I'm hoping that our speakers are going to touch on what the master plan has said in the various areas, and we can bring some of those to the discussions today. Also very important is, as I've said, that local government is really at the coalface of service delivery. And it's absolutely, absolutely critical that local government is running well for this effective service delivery to happen. And we have seen calls from many quarters that local government does need support to enable them to fulfill this very, very critical function. So I'm hoping that this conversation today will assist us in talking about these issues, and hopefully at the end of it, we can come up with some firm recommendations and suggestions as to how the entire sector can pull together to achieve these goals. My next point is really about our resources. And here I want to talk about two critical resources. Firstly, obviously, our water resources are very critical. And there's a lot of information in the public domain about the state of our wastewater treatment works, our water treatment works, the work that our catchment management agencies are doing. And all of that is actually geared up to how we preserve this very precious resource of ours. And we know how limited it is. Many parts of our country are facing or have come face to face with their day zero scenarios. And I think all of us understand how critical and precious this resource is. And there are a lot of plans, and part of this conversation is how do we cherish this critical resource. But I also want us to cherish another very critical resource that we have in the country, and that is our engineers and our water sector professionals. And I'm very, very glad that the theme of today's discussion is how do we bring engineers back into engineering and into the broader discussion about how these resources are maintained and managed and implemented. And coupled with that, I also want us as a sector to embrace all the skills that we have in the country, and not just the skills that sit in the public sector. There are skills that are sitting in the private sector. There's expertise in the private sector. And I'm hoping that when we bring all of these skills together, that we regard all our engineers, whether they sit in the private sector or in the public sector, as a national asset and our national resources, then we can come together and find the solutions to some of these problems. As I've said earlier as well, that our local government needs a lot of support in implementing and delivering on their mandate. And I'm hoping as we get to the end of the discussion, we get to a better understanding as to how we can pool all of the resources that exist in the country, this very precious asset and resource base that we have in our engineers and water sector professionals, to bring all of those together. So with those very few opening remarks, I'm going to hand it over back to our facilitator, and we're really looking forward to the speakers and the different perspectives that they're going to bring to the conversation together. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you very much, Engineer Pillay, for your words. Hopefully that is what is going to happen with today's session, to breathe life into the master plan so that our people all over the country, including the village of Matiza, where I come from in Limpopo, will have water. For now, they do have people that are qualified as engineers, but they're still sitting there without water. At this point, I'm going to hand over to William to facilitate the next sessions. And let us ask ourselves this question: what needs to be done better to restore and embrace engineering in the water and sanitation sector? I thank you.
No, thanks, Gottfried, facilitator, and thanks for those welcomed, warm welcome from the president of Cesa. Indeed, President, that we really need to ensure that we collectively harvest the skills in the country to be able then to move forward in terms of addressing some of the challenges that we are faced with. And importantly, that our focus will be on the master plan as well. However, there are some other issues that might not find expression in the master plan that we might want to unearth here today, and we will have to have some discussions with the department as we move forward. So thank you for those words of wisdom. Colleagues, to kick us off, as outlined in the program, we wish to invite Abri Vermeulen, who's a PR engineer, and he's the chair of the water division or water engineering at SAICI, the South African Institute of Civil Engineering, to kick us off with an important setting the scene presentation about what they have observed as opportunities and threats in the water sector. Over to you, Abri.
Thanks, everybody. I think this is a very good initiative, and I've been asked to provide SAIC's perspective, and that's what I'll do. I'll try and watch the time. I know I have 20 minutes. So, firstly, before we go there, I mean, this presentation does not reflect my opinion. I asked widely for input to it, particularly from the committee. We have a committee of the Water Engineering Division, so they provided input. I also specifically asked input from Sam Amot, who does the infrastructure report card, and just to mention that we are working towards doing a revised infrastructure report card. So Sam provided input. I also got input from Alison Lawless, who I'm sure you're all aware of, who has done the numbers and needs, the original one and the update, and I'm also including some of that slide. So yeah, just as a background to SAIC, we have around 15,000 engineering professionals in the country, civil engineering professionals. So SAIC is civil engineers, and as you know, water engineering is a subset of civil engineering. And the 15,000 is engineers, technologists, and technicians. So they obviously also work in other sectors like transport, rail, structures, all of those things. The current membership of the Water Division is 3,122. I think there are a few more professionals that are not membership. I think last we looked on, we probably 80% of the water practitioners were members of SAIC. So that's great. The water engineering is one of 11 divisions, and we represent the industry's view, and we are widely representative of civil engineers in South Africa. So I think that's quite important because the water division, as well as our committee, consists of professionals not just from the private sector, but also from the public sector. We have people on the committee from the Department of Water and Sanitation. We have people that work at municipalities. We have people that work at water boards, at TCTA, in engineering, in construction. So it is widely representative of the engineering industry. Also, we are widely representative of the various races and genders within the industry. So the fact that I'm giving you this is, as I said, I'm trying to present that the industry's view, and I've tried hard to get everybody's input. So I think that's important. And, you know, some of these things, you know, that I'm going to mention actually were specifically given by people from municipalities. So maybe, you know, we know this. So I think, you know, as I was listening to the previous presentations, I was thinking, this is a very good conversation that we are having, but we are still talking to ourselves. So while it is great that we talk to ourselves, we also need to think about how do we take this further. So maybe in the context of the water sector, if you work in the water sector, you will know this, but I think it's important to frame it. I mean, in South Africa, we have a water scarcity, and that scarcity is not an absolute scarcity, but it has skewed rainfall patterns with high rainfall on the narrow coastal belt, and then we have a rapidly much drier interior that it gets drier towards the west. So we have water, but we don't have it in the place that we want it. Because of that, in the past, we have heavily engineered systems, and I am sure you are aware of the integrated Vaal River system that consists of 17 interconnected dams with various pipelines and pump stations. Some of those are in Lesotho. It's across various provinces, but that is to make sure that Gauteng has sufficient water, Gauteng and surrounding areas. The other issue around our water scarcity is unreliability. We have frequent droughts, on average 1 in 5 years. That is obviously exacerbated by climate change, and that's a further unknown, but we're all aware of the recent drought in the Western Cape and the ongoing drought in the Eastern Cape. So those are things we have to deal with. Then the other big one, which is very critical, is that we have rapid urbanization, which mainly means rapidly growing informal settlement. And it is interesting when you look at the figures. I did some work with GCRO a few years ago, and Gauteng and the Western Cape are the only provinces that are growing in population at a provincial level. The other provinces are shrinking, and this is due to rapid urbanization. Into Gauteng, it's from everywhere in the country as well as the continent. Interestingly, mainly from KwaZulu-Natal. And Gauteng gets 500,000 people every year additional. So the question is, what does that mean for Gauteng's water supply and infrastructure? Most of these people go into informal settlements. So the rapid urbanization is a very serious issue that we have to find solutions for. That means increasing water demand and an inability of systems to supply that water. So just as an example is the integrated Vaal River system has a 5-year storage capacity. So if there's no rain for 5 years, it will provide water for 5 years. Obviously, there will be some rain. The Western Cape supply system has a 2-year storage capacity. And what happened with the drought is there was actually 3 years of severe drought in a row. But those were probably at 10 years ago's population. So with these additional population, that means the systems, the storage time that they have decreases quite rapidly. And then we also know there's environmental and ecological infrastructure degradation. So the thing is, these are the challenges the country faces in the water sector. So I thought it was important to spend some time on that. Also, just in terms of engineering, I mean, our water engineering sector is leading in the world because of the water scarcity. You know, the biggest challenges ensures that you come up with the biggest innovations. The concept of desalination of seawater originated in South Africa. On coastal protection, I just put that little picture there of the Dol Osa. That was developed in South Africa because of our rough coastline. Also, we are known in the world to be leaders in water resource management and water resource development, the engineered systems, and the National Water Act has been described as an excellent act. We know there's problems with implementation, but we are very innovative as a sector. So, I mean, I've started on the challenge. I'll give a few of the slides of the challenges. This is copied from the master plan that has been referred to before. And I'm just highlighting the ones in black there. Sorry, I'm just, okay. That the master plan, which was, this is from the call to action that was published in 2019. 41% of municipal water does not generate revenue, and 35% is lost through leakage. Now, that varies greatly across the country, but that's very serious for municipal water. And municipalities are losing 1,660 million cubic meters per year through non-revenue water, which at a cost of 6 Rand per meter, which we know is conservative. Most water is more expensive than that, probably double of that. That's close to 10 billion Rand a year that municipalities are losing. So we are aware of these challenges. They are documented in the National Master Plan. In addition to that, what we've noticed as SAICI is that in terms of service delivery, we know measuring is critical. You cannot manage what you don't know or understand, and there is too little data available and reported on. Now, you know, people are often very critical of municipalities, and I think that's a bit unfair because we have some that are among the best in the world. I mean, eThekwini has won awards, and we know we have some of the worst in the world, and we have everything in between. So it's really unfair to say they are like this. That's like saying, oh, cars are like this, they don't drive, because you saw a few wrecks on the side of the road. I mean, we need, but the point is that many municipalities report well, but others don't report well. So that is a very important thing, I think, in the sector to measure. And we know how to do it. Yeah, unfortunately, as I said earlier, I need to leave at 12 today, so I'm going to miss the last part. But I think from SAICI, we think rather use tried and tested methods. Be a fast follower than a new mover. So while we support all these new technological innovations, if you want to make a system work, rather use the tried and tested methods. There's also an issue with procurement. This is an issue that we can talk about very much. But I think what we see is that if procurement is not managed by the agency procuring, the implementer can be primed for failure. And particularly rules from government and national government are often unclear and inconsistently applied. And then the contractor or the municipality gets blamed. And I think that's an issue that we need to address in terms of procurement. Also, what we've noticed is that there's public disrespect of infrastructure, which is a serious concern. I mean, infrastructure is an easy target. And the bottom line is we cannot afford to lose any of our infrastructure. We cannot afford to have pumps vandalized or stolen or pipelines broken or anything. And we need to create respect for infrastructure. When the previous speaker was talking about the resources, I was thinking actually infrastructure is another resource that we've created and we must respect that. So in our opinion, as SAICI, the engineering part of it is not the main challenge. We know how to do these things. But for an effective sector, we need to change the way municipalities operate to enable these to implement and manage infrastructure. So, I mean, one can ask the question, are municipalities set up to be infrastructure utilities? I'm glad to see we've got Joburg Water and Irwat on the program because they are infrastructure utilities. And, you know, maybe in metros where you have over 20,000 employees, then it works well to have a service delivery unit as part of a municipality, but generally are they set up the right way? In our opinion, we need to make changes to that. So sorry, the next ones I'm going to go through quickly. I'm just watching the time. This is straight from the needs and numbers from Alison Lawless. The comparison between 2005 and 2015, there has been a great improvement in having civil engineering practitioners in municipalities, as you can see from the numbers. Also, the age profile has changed significantly from 2005, and you'll see there the orange is white and the blue is black. So basically we have, in the 10 years since then, there has been a great increase, particularly in black engineering professionals and them working in municipalities, which is really encouraging. And I think we can see here that our engineering fraternity is reflecting the country now. And the concern, though, is that we have many, if you look at the age distribution, we have many young practitioners, and the way the engineering works is that young people need to be developed. They need to be mentored and taught by older people. So we have lots of young professionals that we must develop. I asked Alison whether an update to this is planned, and she said at this stage not, but I think we can assume that this trend is increasing. So it's a good trend, but the concern is that there are many young people that need insight. So the result of limited civil engineering practitioners in municipality is that you get limited holistic or long-term planning. There's limited in-house expertise for design or for managing of consultants. There's limited in-house expertise for contracts, for tender documents, interacting with contractors. There's limited maintenance taking place. There's limited or inadequate input to the budgeting process. Systems are not in place in terms of O&M. If somebody calls in and say, I've got a breakage, you know, you need a system to say, create a job card, allocate it to somebody, send somebody out, give feedback. That whole system must be maintained properly. And the processes are not always in place or enforced. And what we've seen is that the remaining senior staff either don't have the time, or there are no senior staff to train and guide the junior staff that are entering local government. So I think that is a concern from SAIC's side. So that's in terms of the challenges. In terms of opportunities, I think we have to be realistic that as a country, we will have in future more frequent water supply outages, water shedding, if you will. There's going to be more serious issues. So we need to start now on, firstly, I think educating the public towards water saving, to be water wise and to respect infrastructure. You know, the question is, what have we learned from the Eastern and the Western Cape water crisis? Have we learned from it? The Eastern Cape one is still ongoing. The Western Cape, I've actually recently moved here, and I find it encouraging that people are very aware of the dam levels. So I think the drought has had a major positive effect. But are we, you know, is that happening in the rest of the country as well? I think there's an opportunity to have more decentralized wastewater treatment facilities in terms of cost and reusing the water. Now, you know, we can have much debate around, you know, decentralized. I think the issue with water is that the capital investment required is disproportionately large compared to the operational cost of general other things. And because of that, it has to be planned at a central level. So we shouldn't have just everybody setting up their own little septic tank and decentralized system. But if it's planned and integrated into the bigger one, then it can have benefits. So I think the one thing that we've said consistently is to professionalize the public sector. There's no quick fix. There is a new professionalization document that we still have to comment on. But from SAIC's side, we would say we need to return the authority to the line departments. The comment was made that the CFO is the most important person in a municipality. From SAIC's side, we think that if we want to make municipalities to be successful infrastructure utilities, the main authority needs to be in the engineering department. We need to develop a competency framework with COGTA. We need to develop meaningful organograms and job descriptions. And by the way, this is from Alison's talk. Recognize and reward experience in local government and help people with their professional registration and support continuous professional development. I think what was very good, this is my personal opinion, what was very good in the beginning is that they used the term engineer to speak to somebody. And I think that is unfortunately lacking in South Africa. I've worked outside South Africa in African countries, and it's a big deal to have a title like engineer. It's the same as a doctor. And I would see in meetings, people refer and they'll say, Engineer Pillay, what is your opinion? Engineer from Vermeulen, what do you say? It's like, that's the way people talk. I previously had a colleague from India, and actually he said to me, he's very surprised that everybody in South Africa calls themselves engineer. It's the guy that came to do his IT support at home said, oh, I'm a software engineer, you know, but he's not a PR eng. And so I personally think that will help. If you register, you get a title. I think that will help with just with the general respect that we have for engineers. And then I think importantly also attract those back that have left. As Cesa said previously, many of those people are now in the private sector. Some of them have left the country, some of them are in other institutions. Some unfortunately have left the profession, and I think it's important that we bring those people back. So I think the opportunities is to appoint qualified people in municipality, engineering professionals, and I think importantly into key strategic positions within the municipality and within the water sector. We need to really work on reduction of water losses, and revenue enhancement goes with it. I think often revenue enhancement is very much linked to water losses. And then we know the issue around the investment in CapEx and OpEx. I think the operational expenditure, as we know, is lagging behind, and that really is critical. And we think that if you have engineering professionals in key positions, they will motivate much stronger for getting that operational expenditure. Because the reality is, if we don't operate and maintain infrastructure according to its design capacity, you run it down much faster. If you operate a pipeline over its capacity, you can, but it will last half the time, which means you need to replace that pipeline in 10 years instead of in 20 years. And you have a very big capital expenditure then to achieve that. Then there's also around job creation and youth employment. We know that is a critical thing, and that we can work out a program to the revival of the local economy with LED, particularly around townships economy. So the operational and capital expenditure needs to very much focus around the job creation. And then we've talked about the skills development programs, promotion of skills transfer to local communities and municipal staff training initiatives. So yeah, that's all from my side. I think that was my 20 minutes. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you.
No, excellent, Abri. Thanks for that very insightful and thought-provoking presentation, which essentially outlined the opportunities and threats within the water sector. And I think we are taking note of on some of the issues. Please, colleagues, you can deposit your ideas and your thoughts and your comments on the chat box. We will give you an opportunity at some point to reflect on some of the issues that are unfolding as the programs unfolds. With that said, Abri, you spoke about the young engineers. So we are pleased and blessed by the presence of a young engineer, Jessica, who was Cesa's young engineers engineer of the year of Cesa, and she is with Bosch Capital, if I'm not mistaken, or Bosch Projects. And in that regard, let's afford an opportunity to give us a young perspective. Jessica, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, William. Good morning, Program Director, members of Salga, members of Cesa, fellow participants and guests. My task this morning is to set the scene on the perspectives and observations of water and sanitation delivery at local government level on the backdrop of restoring and acknowledging the critical role of the engineering fraternity in water and sanitation sector. At the first day of Salga's 2020 National Members Assembly, in his keynote address, our President Ramaphosa highlighted that the 2018-2019 financial, in the 2018-2019 financial year, only 20 of 257 municipalities received clean audits. He also explained that uneven performance of municipalities has left many municipalities unable to carry out the basic functions, let alone their developmental roles. And in addition, issues of corruption and governance failures actually leads to credibility and a believability crisis by our people. And it's therefore imperative that we turn this dysfunction around. So it's really key that we are here today having this level of conversation. If one were to liken the service delivery and infrastructure space to the human body, the body itself would represent national government, the key supporting systems by the various SOEs and provincial departments. But local government would be at the heart, maintaining life-sustaining services via its arteries and veins as a key service delivery driver. The engineering fraternity and the associated engineering value chain would be the oxygen-rich blood that enables this body to function. And at the heart of service delivery sits local government. And while we look at other government entities that enable the functioning of local government is customer facing, it's people facing, and it's the face of service delivery in the country. and the ongoing service delivery protests across the country talks directly to the very base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of psychological and safety needs. So basic services, water, sanitation, electricity, and housing, and employment opportunities, but more specifically than opportunities, jobs. So honing in on the water and sanitation sector and unpacking the value chain of goods and services that relate to it, the engineering profession sits as an enabler for the service delivery goals of local government. We know that the service delivery pipeline is characterized by several stages of planning, of design, construction, operations, and maintenance. And these are the core functions within the ambit of trained and experienced engineers. And however, this cannot be optimized or enhanced without being able to utilize the required skills to fulfill these functions. So as Abri mentioned earlier, SAIC's 2017 infrastructure report card rates the various infrastructure classes in South Africa. So the water rating averaged at a level D. So this rating is as a result on a scale of A to E, on a scale of A to F. The rating is as a result of the deterioration in the aging bulk water infrastructure portfolio. This is also as a result of insufficient maintenance and neglect of renewal, and partly due to funding shortfalls. This is also as a result of the depletion of skilled personnel and officials in the water sector. And this hinders decision-making, planning, and development to avoid these shortfalls. Our major water systems are generally operated too close to failures, with many of the projects behind schedule, and reduces the resilience to even the lowest drought conditions. And this results in significant service disruptions. Abri went into that really nicely in the previous presentation. Damage caused by increased service delivery protests in urban areas and rural areas often diverts funding from maintenance and expansion budgets. There's also the compounding effect of water losses that's particularly through non-revenue water as a result of poor asset conditions, but also through water theft. And this continues to put strain on our water systems. And then a look at sanitation. So sanitation for major areas was rated a C-, with all other in major areas, with all other areas rated E. It's noted that the condition and functionality of our sanitation infrastructure is also of grave concern, especially outside of the urban areas. And whilst the number of unserved households has decreased significantly by percentage, accounting for growth in population and households, the actual number still remains at 4 million unserviced. And with many of our urban facilities unable to cope with increased demand, our wastewater treatment works are in critical condition. We discharge significant amounts of untreated waste into water bodies, and the skills required to operate and maintain these sanitation systems and these technologies are also scarce outside of major urban centers. And what often happens is downstream consumers and ecosystems are affected negatively. What we're still seeing is that many rural communities still don't have access to safe sanitation, and pit toilets are often underserviced. They pose health and safety challenges. So this does paint a rather dire picture, but today's discussions are intended to seek out solutions and to also raise the pertinent actions that will restore the critical role of the engineering fraternity in the water and sanitation sector. What we need is a fundamental mindset change to acknowledge the key role of the engineering fraternity. Engineers in the public sector and in the private sector are often seen as sitting on opposing sides of the field in service delivery. The private sector on one side, the public sector on the other, and academia and research are key components, but somewhere in between. The way, particularly private sector and local government engages via a procurement system that often doesn't offer the robustness to deal with the complexities of the service delivery landscape. So I'll echo the words of the Cesa president, who said that all our engineers are a national asset. Cesa represents in excess of 580 consulting engineering firms with over 20,000 employees. So that gives you an indication of the skill set and experience that sits within Cesa member firms. So in setting the scene for this morning's deliberations, let's consider the key role of engineers in redefining the water sector and in basic service delivery in South Africa, also considering the various stakeholders and how they relate to each other. So I've summed this up in 4 major components and that I wish for you to consider. So the first one is coordination and governance. We've seen poor coordination and a lack of synergy of activities between the various stakeholders in the local government service delivery space. Infrastructure delivery is a technically driven task, but it's often led by financial and legal and procurement professionals in this space. It's also made worse by non-engineers practicing engineering work. This has eroded the ability of technical and engineering professionals in playing a leading and coordinating role in delivery. So what we need to see is engineering sitting back with engineers. The second would be capacity building, registration and accreditations. Engineering and engineers need a home and a protecting and a promoting owner. Like the medical and the accounting professions, we need to ask what needs to be done better by our custodians and how they can enable this protective environment on the engineering profession. We see inadequate capacity building and skills development at key levels in local government, particularly for graduates. However, poor attention that we give to the development of the skills pipeline, this goes from artisans to graduates to senior ranking professionals, with senior ranking professionals also being responsible for good governance at local government levels. The low order books and availability of engineering work for private sector firms has also had a knock-on effect on the ability of training in this space. So the sector itself, with reduced training budgets, with reduced emphasis on capacity building, stands to lose the ability to develop skills during this critical time that we find ourselves in. The transformation of the sector is also impacted by this pipeline. And this goes across racial boundaries, gender, and age transformation, from the age transformation perspectives. There's also insufficient emphasis on credentialing, on professional registration, and accreditation at the various levels in the water and sanitation sector. So although this is not exclusively a challenge in the water and sanitation sector, but across the engineering fraternity, what we need to be able to do is to amplify the role of the municipal engineer in local government. These municipal engineers are instrumental in the bid preparation process, in evaluation of innovations, and they're also responsible for procurement reforms for the benefit of the sector. The third would be innovation and technology. So some of the key aspects include prioritizing technology appropriateness. So think water and wastewater technology and accessibility, resulting in difficulty in shifting solutions to implementation. And that's a key driver of technology. We also need to create an enabling environment for engineers to be able to bring in appropriate thinking and approaches, such as prioritizing the food, water, energy nexus as it relates to an alternative way to look at service delivery, and also delivering the multipliers that we look at in infrastructure. So that includes employment opportunities, stimulating local business and SMME development. There's also challenges in technology readiness. So these need a rethink with regard to market development, technology readiness for the development of new technology, and also the value chain development that comes from this. So this includes things like byproducts from waste beneficiation, for instance. And these prove difficult to scale up because we are not creating this enabling environment. The sterile environment that gets created does not allow innovation to thrive. So the solutions that emerge from research and development, and whether it's formal research and development or informal research and development, when we're not creating the enabling environment for it to be tested and implemented enough. And as mentioned by Abri, we have highly engineered solutions, infrastructure solutions, particularly in the water sector. And there are some instances, there are some instances where decentralized infrastructure and technology would be more appropriate. But with the types of challenges that we experience in terms of the rollout of infrastructure and in the operation and maintenance space, these solutions and this level of innovation is sometimes hindered. So we need to be able to go back to thinking about how do we create the enabling environment for innovation and technology to thrive. And then finally would be project feasibility, procurement, and funding. Oftentimes, our projects are not planned and designed for bankability. So this limits funding and the ability to raise finance on projects. And this is particularly problematic for rural municipalities and for municipalities that don't have a large rate base and revenue base, and those who are significantly dependent on grants and equitable share. So we could talk at length about procurement and the procurement environment to be able to enable the rate of service delivery that's required. But being able to plan projects with bankability in mind is key, irrespective of whether a project is funded by grant funding or through loans or private sector finance investment. We often hear also that funding is not a problem for infrastructure projects. But if that's the case, then we're either not properly matching the need to the solution, or we're not structuring projects in a technically sound and practical way. So it goes back to who structures projects. And once we put engineers back into the seat of structuring projects, that would really be the key to the lever that will turn service delivery. So even basic services are assets, and with the correct structuring will encourage appropriate stakeholders to come on board. So in closing, I hope that I've set the scene on perspectives and observations of water and sanitation delivery at local government levels. And I look forward to the deliberations this afternoon. So Program Director, back to you.
No, thank you, Jessica. Excellent. You've really met our expectations, particularly outlining those 4 key areas that you have identified as critical. And the first one, I must indicate that you are spot on, right, in terms of coordination and governance. And we have seen it with the fight against COVID, that there hasn't been in my own opinion, a fairly coordinated plan that needs to fight this particular virus from either the water sector, the energy sector, the health sector, and government in totality. And I think those 4 points that you've raised, in my own opinion, are so vital that we must reflect on them very deeply, including the capacity building. So, but I don't want to spoil your excellent talk and the 4 points that you've made. Suffice to say, we thank you so much for your insightful presentation. And I'm hoping you will stay with us till the end, so that when we begin to surface those solutions of what can we do differently, that at least we can reflect and make inputs on those. Thank you so very much, colleagues. We are done with setting the scene. There's one more presentation that we thought is also crucial for us to take note of, noting what is happening in the electricity or energy sector. And we are grateful that the Water Research Commission has availed themselves to say a word or two or share some thoughts with us in terms of what they foresee as some solutions in the water and sanitation space, noting the energy difficulties. And Jay Bagwan from the Water Research Commission will be delivering that input. Jay, the floor is yours.
William, thank you very much for affording this platform to share, some of my thoughts on work that we have commissioned at the WRC on the energy aspect. And generally in the water space, it's something we tend to ignore. And I thought in a very short a few slides, let me give some context on the importance of electricity in infrastructure delivery as a whole, especially water and sanitation, that largely depends on electricity for its execution. And thanks for Jessica for setting the scene. I'm not going to take the thunder away. I think it's all there, but the issue of electricity is invisible in the water environment, and people that manage these systems don't give a lot of attention to it. And at the WRC, we've led several studies to bring this, into the forefront in terms of planning and integration at a water services level, to break away from that linear kind of approach to a more multidisciplinary in terms of building security of supply. So I want to thank my teams that have worked on it, from Chris Herold, Marco van Dijk, David Winter from Frost and Sullivan. It's largely their work. But the WRC saw this problem way back in 2010, when we started to see the emergence of the first load shedding incidences. And we just looked at Joburg Water, as for example, that started to have, on a yearly basis, 262 incidences of outages of several nature, load shedding, failures, etc. And the duration, were a concern. They kept on increasing, and that has a significant impact on service delivery. And I'm talking about water services outages, electricity that is dependent. And that, started the crisis and started to raise this problem, in the water environment that as a growing issue that needed to. So we did this risk analysis and, went through a whole process as to where largely, we are exposed, as a sector. So, in terms of abstraction, South Africa, fortunately, is largely gravity fed. So there's not much, impact except where you have pump extraction, etc., your telemetry, especially on the bulk water side. It doesn't use a lot of energy and pumps in that sector. But then, when you come to the water treatment environment, 85 to 99% of water treatment plants require energy. Okay, and there's all sorts of instrumentation that sustains water treatment. Okay, and if you have, an energy shutdown at a water treatment level, then you are at big risk. So this is one of the big risky areas we identified in the chain of supplying water. Then when we come to distribution, again, most of it is gravity fed. So it's not a big issue, but where you pumping in some areas to get the relative heads and the pressure, this becomes a huge challenge in terms of outages or load shedding going forward. And then the next big area is wastewater, because again, like water treatment, wastewater is dependent on energy largely to run the more modern systems of aeration and transfer between different tanks, etc., and recycling and all kind of stuff. So, that is a huge issue as well, in terms of energy. And we just did an estimation that in 2006, that if every just city of Cape Town had to institute backup energy in all of their treatment plan, that was a 5 million rand outlay. Okay, so it's a significant cost, to the municipality in terms of building those aspects in. So the 2011, recommendations highlighted many problem areas. One is that, the communication side. There was no communication between ESCOMs and etc. in the municipalities. Someone up there just switched it off and, didn't care what happens downstream. So the issue of communication is much better now, but I don't think ESCOM has a sense of where the high-risk critical areas in a municipality is, and I don't think the water services people communicate that. The hospital guys and that communicate that. So if you're in an area of a hospital, you generally don't get any load shedding. It's managed. So these are the things that we see, that the communication is not good enough at a water services level, and we're not prioritizing that. We also found that, just doing an assessment on some of the critical areas, on-site power supply backup never existed, and we've seen that at Rand Water when we had the 2 weeks failure, etc., on some of the energy systems failing, the generators, etc. So we don't have a sense in our planning around backup power. Okay, that's in 2011. Okay, and then the third one is that the human resources capabilities at a municipal water services level didn't exist to support any power outages. So it's again that gap around capacity and skills. And then, together with that, the contingency plans to respond to this growing problem was not in place in many of the municipalities at that time. And nothing has changed, after, 10 years, etc. We followed this up in 2018, and we took a case study approach, and not to say that Swane is bad, but Swane afforded us the opportunity to do a whole risk assessment on their energy risk, from a water services perspective. And from the modeling work, we found that, the worst case scenario is highly probable if our trajectory around energy continues, because we have so many old systems and it's so highly vulnerable, okay, that we are doing a lot of patchwork on the ESCOM side. So we can, with a 100-year and 55-year probability, experience a 30-day blackout, okay? And if that happens, it's much worse than a drought, because many things will come to, a huge standstill. But what it also, the Swane case study highlighted again is that there's lack of, any attention, and there is no preparedness at a municipal level around the connection of energy and water. Okay, it was okay, if it went off. There was no concern around water quality, contamination, etc., and it's a laissez-faire. So there is still no attention on the importance of energy, okay, with many of the critical infrastructure aspects. We saw that where we are in the country, we need to have backup power, both mobile and permanent, okay, in terms of dealing with this. This energy crisis is not going to go away, according to me, in the next 10 years, etc. It's going to be there. It's a long-term problem. And we need to adapt at a municipal level, okay, out of that linear approach and become more multidisciplinary in ensuring that there's a continuity of supply, that there's continuity of water security, together with the operation and maintenance aspect. And the last thing is that, we've been promoting innovation through alternative energy and power generation, and very little of it is being absorbed and incorporated, as an opportunity in the sector. Again, because what was presented before, we've become too used to building pipes and reservoirs that we forget that there's opportunities, around us to deal with these issues. So just to share that, over the years, we've been promoting conduit hydro as an opportunity where we can harness energy from distribution systems and use it to provide electricity, either to battery backup or into the our own supply grids to cover some of the operational costs and reduce the need on electricity. And there's an example of Bloom Water where we've demonstrated it, and the whole Bloom Water office is off the grid in terms of energy supply, and they're saving, closely about 300,000 to 400,000 rand a year by purely just tapping into the energy that gets bled of the system. And then, Swane has taken this on in a big way, and they're starting to ensure over the next 10 years that most of their reservoirs, which is the low-hanging fruit, would incorporate a hydro turbine inline conduit systems so that it can use this energy as offsetting and being there as a backup in the future, but also into the operational environment. So this is where I think innovation needs to drive the change in the municipal environment and the engineering environment, because the uptake is too slow. Okay, we tend to hold on to our old design drawings, etc., because it offers us the efficiency, but it's perpetuating the same problems, okay, by doing the same designs. And I think we need to now use the engineering fraternity to lead the innovation space and come up with more sustainable solutions going into the future. So innovation should be part of the engineering excellence going forward. Thank you very much, William.
No, thank you, Jay, for that short, insightful presentation on essentially promoting the nexus between water and energy. And importantly, that, the message that I'm taking out of what you've just said is that the long and short of it is we've been napping, essentially. We have not been proactive. We've been sleeping on the jobs in terms of how we begin or how we need to begin to surface this important nexus of energy and water. But with that said, colleagues, so we've finished the part on the setting the scenes. And in that regard, our next segment of our presentation will then focus on the perspectives to be given by 3 key stakeholders. And I wish to invite Mr. Mpofu from WISA's Young Water Professionals, just to reflect on what was said and reflect on what do they think are some of the observations that they have seen, and perhaps they can even outline some of the solutions that they foresee. But I know there's a slot later on in the day about solutions. But let me invite Ashton to go first. Ashton.
Thank you very much, Program Director, for the kind introductions. I must say that it has been indeed thought-provoking inputs from the rest of the panelists. I hope I'll be able to maintain the momentum. Yes, also a disclaimer from my side as well is that these views are the views of young people. They are not my views alone. As a young person as well, representing young people, these are the views of the young people in the water sector. Program Director, let me begin by maybe quoting our former statement, because I think I always love to take wisdom from our elders and protect myself from saying much of my views, but go with the sayings of our elders. So I'd like to quote Tata Nelson Mandela. I quote, he said, massive poverty and obscene inequality are such terrible scourges of our times in which the world boasts breathtaking advances in science, in technology industry, and wealth accumulation that they have to rank alongside slavery and apartheid as social evils, close quote. So I think this has always been my opening statement when I try to explain how young people feel when it comes to our, water and sanitation issues in South Africa, that young people are still marginalized. They still live in poverty, regardless of the advancement made since '94. But we as young people still feel that we have not yet seen the freedom because most of our members are still stuck in obscene poverty, where there is that lack of access to drinking water and lack of access to dignified, you need to use that word, sanitation. So this is where we stand as young people, the fact that we have not seen great advances in terms of, the country, the whole engineering fraternity and everybody involved, even leaders and in government, to afford, these basic human rights, of access to drinking water and sanitation. But the irony of it is the fact that as Jay has touched on this, as Ab has touched on this, as Joe will touch on this further on, we do have these breathtaking technologies that we have in our midst. And the adoption or the absorbing of these technologies into our water sector is taking too long. We as young people feel that these new technologies can play a very huge role in terms of solving our problems. And we are technologically savvy, we love technology, and we strongly feel that our water sector needs to advance and start to absorb or embrace these new technologies. And we know that there are a number of things that we still need to deal with. One of them, of course, Africa did touch on the National Water and Sanitation Master Plan, that we have a lack of capital investment, And my one, quoting the CEO of NYDA when he presented the parliamentary portfolio, one of the things that young people have said is the fact that there is too much corruption in the country. We feel that with this kind of way of doing things, even the municipal space, there is no way that we are going to move forward. Young people are unemployed. We're sitting at about 75% unemployment rate using the extended definition, where young people want jobs. Young people have been afforded free education. We now have these degrees, these engineering degrees. We have them. We have graduated, but there are no jobs for young people to be absorbed into the working industry. So these are the particular problems that young people are facing. But the question still remains, what can be done as the water sector to ensure that we incorporate and absorb these young minds into our municipal space, where they can play a huge role and facilitate the intake of new technologies, because we believe that we can be a change agent in terms of absorbing new technologies. As Joe might present, or as Jay might also agree with me, that one of the barriers that has been highlighted when it comes to absorbing new technology is lack of technical skills. But where are these skills? Because we believe as young people that we've got these skills. Yes, I said we need to warn them, we need to nurture them, we need to develop them. But how can we do this without absorbing young people into the industry? They are still sidelined. We still sit in the sidelines. We still request for a seat in the table. We still request to be, included within, the water sector. But that is taking too long as well, and it's becoming frustrating for young people. Young people end up, taking other jobs. As much as they try to, we try to encourage that young people must be employers and not wait to be employed. But the problem is there is not enough support, for young people that want to be employers. We need to see more support for SMMEs and for these entrepreneurs, so that they can be themselves employers, in the sector. I must say, that the NDP and even the Agenda 2063 does put the onus on SMMEs to become, the agents of employment for young people. NDP says we want to create 90% of the jobs from SMMEs. We want to see unemployment being reduced to 6% by 2030. And this is being put on the onus of SMMEs. But what are we doing as a sector, to promote entrepreneurs in the water and sanitation sector? So this is a question that I'm posing to the whole engineering fraternity, that as much as we teach engineering, as much as we are producing engineers from our universities, what are we doing as well to promote entrepreneurship within our education. We need also to teach entrepreneurship. We need also to teach young people that it's not all about being employed, but it's also you as an individual becoming an employer. I touched on corruption. This is one of the things, that is putting a barrier into, private individuals or private stakeholders entering the municipal space and, affording us funding. It's always really embarrassing, to find that even within our own structures, our own professional organizations, such as EXA, Cesa, and so forth, you find that your own CEO of that particular organization is suspended due to misconduct. This is what we see as young people, and it's so embarrassing, the fact that the people that we look up to and where we think we'll get a direction, they're not giving us a direction. Instead, they become a stumbling block to progress of the water and sanitation sector. Maybe just to conclude, and thank you, April, for giving statistics about transformation. We as young people feel that we are not doing enough. Yes, we might be seeing more Black professionals and more young people playing a huge role, but where are the women, when it comes to that transformation? We need to see more women engineers. And I'd like to express and say, happy belated International Women's Engineering Day for Women. I mean, that was yesterday. We need to celebrate women in the sector. So we need to absorb more young people, particularly ladies, or women, to play a huge role in our sanitation sector. So with those words, I would like also to shed light that we might need to look into our governance and policies. It would be nice to see our policies favoring procurement of SMMEs or young people-led companies or organizations or businesses, so that young people get also a share as part of the economy, and inclusivity as well. I always say that engineering solutions are not always the best. Looking at the sanitation side of things, there's lack of acceptance. Looking at water reuse, there's lack of acceptance by the communities, because engineers, we think that whatever we devise, everyone goes force fees and down people's throat. We need to be inclusive and work with young people and work with communities, so that every solution that we provide might be better accepted, because it has been co-created and co-designed with the rest of our masses. Program Director, I think those are my closing words, and I would like to conclude by quoting the statesman as well, when he said, while poverty exists, there is no true freedom. And again, he further on went on to say that as long as poverty and injustice exist in our world, none of us can fully rest. Close quote. I would like to end with those words from our Tata Nelson Mandela, and say that engineers that have joined the call today, as long as we have this injustice and poverty, we can't truly rest. There is still more that we can do. We can still achieve SDG 6 by 2030. Thank you very much, Program Director.
No, thank you, Ashton, for that message. And I'm hearing, a lot of emphasis on tech and innovation, emphasis on mentoring and coaching, emphasis on job creation, and emphasis on entrepreneurship, including opportunities that we might have to create for young people. Evidently so, we are not seeing young people emerging and really taking the bulls by its horns in this particular sector, particularly women. And in that regard, these are some of the issues we're going to have to reflect on as we steam ahead as part of this discussion. But thank you so much for that message. The next presenter, colleagues, is it's a young engineer again. This is still Youth Month. We wish to invite Tevin, who is the chairperson of Cesa in KZN, to really convey the message of the youth in terms of this particular sector. Tevin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Program Director and Facilitator. Thank you to Salga and Cesa for allowing me to deliver my presentation on behalf of the Cesa YPF. Some good points have been brought up in the previous presentations. Just some background to the Cesa YPF. The forum consists of young professionals who are passionate about the engineering industry and are interested in ensuring the development, growth, and the promotion of the profession, thus ensuring the sustainability of engineering skills for the country. My presentation is fairly simple to follow. I'm not here to provide formulas or theories. I'm here to ask 3 questions. Do you really need water? What do young professionals in engineering consultants do? And why do we have more problems than solutions? Do you really need water? I would like everyone to get up and go get a cup of coffee or a glass of water. Yes, a simple task. Now, within 50 kilometers of where you are, there is a young 7-year-old girl needing a drink of water. Not because it's hot, not because she's tired of exercising, but because she needs water to drink. Amongst many things, our body requires water to carry oxygen to all the cells of our body. Without oxygen, your cells will die. Your body will completely shut down. Now, how do you feel after drinking those 8 required glasses of water or those 3 cups of coffee? I'm guessing you need to use the toilet. So let's think about the 7-year-old girl. Where does she go? It's not just one child. There are 21 million people in South Africa without potable water and 14 million people without proper sanitation. If you think load shedding is affecting your life, what happens when water shedding is implemented? The impact on lives are 10 times greater. Is this not a problem that can be solved? Is the South African engineer not the most suitable, most knowledgeable, most trained person to do so? What do young professionals in engineering consultants do? One of the objectives of Cesa Young Professional Forum is to find ways to bridge the large age gap between experienced senior engineers and developing junior engineers. Yes, I acknowledge that there is a gap, but think about this. Young professionals have a lot to offer as well. Let me give you a few points. Large-scale water purification by reverse osmosis was done in 1977 in the US. There would be only a selected few who could afford this. Fast forward to today, we can buy a system from an online store, Take-A-Lot, for home use. Back in the 1990s, pipelines were designed using software called PipeNet and WaterHam. Today, we make use of Civil 3D and Bentley WaterHammer. It's ever-evolving technology. I had a chat with my director yesterday evening. He said he used to draw plans and details using a TD board. Currently, we cut, copy, and paste using the latest version of AutoCAD on a desktop, a laptop, or even a mobile phone. A few years ago, we would draw out a pump station in 2D. And now I work for a company where we are able to put the client into a virtual headset and let you walk through any pump station, road, or building project before it is even given to the contractor to construct. This was done by the use of building information modeling, BIM for short. This was done by one young professional who was given the opportunity and the knowledge, and he excelled. There are many young professionals in South Africa who have great potential. The potential together with mentorship can be highly beneficial. I had the opportunity to create a Cesa initiative where we get registered professionals to assist candidates one-on-one with their registration process. This is one way to uplift our fellow engineering community. Do you work for an organization that has a structured mentorship program? I do, and it was a great advantage through my journey to professional registration. To aid in bridging the gap, we need to create a chain reaction. Let me explain. No matter who you are, there is always someone who is more experienced than you. Therefore, to progress, learn from someone with more experience. Then you keep the reaction going by teaching someone with less experience, and so on. It is a process, but in time, a 15-year gap becomes 10 and then 5. It's progress in the right direction. Be it technical experience or life experience, make it your goal to mentor someone. To the young professionals, Make it your objective to learn. My last question. Why do we have more problems than solutions? Is our industry growing? Of the many platforms I belong to, there are many young engineers without jobs. One of the main reasons is consulting companies are struggling to maintain their current staff numbers. There are just not enough projects to keep everyone afloat. And for the few projects that are available, let me ask you, why do consultants need to discount their fees? If you're on the operating table, would you ask the doctor for a discount? Earlier, I asked if the engineer was the best person to solve our water and sanitation problems. If the engineer is the right person to solve the 7-year-old girl's problem, then it should not just mean that the engineer is involved in the design phase. Let consulting engineers and clients come together to get projects off the ground. We have highly skilled engineers who can analyze a problem, explore various solutions, determine the best route, and ensure the action is successful. Engineers only have one goal in their mind: making lives of others better. Let us learn to respect the engineer as we would the medical doctor. I'm almost done. We need to grow South Africa's infrastructure, especially in the water and sanitation sector. We need consultants and clients to come together to grow the industry. When I prepared my presentation, I thought about all the negatives. When I speak to you now, I am positive about the future. We all need to be. The illustration is just a standard way of doing a pump station. This is a simple 2D drawing, but with technology and the motivation and the drive of a young professional, the new way is how we produce our drawings now. And this is by the use of BIM. So I'm going to show you a quick video of a young professional and what he has done. And he's able to plot out any view, completely dynamic. This is the engineering today. And this we can use to drive the country forward. Yeah, so no, that's just one of the new technologies that young professionals can bring to the industry now. And I think together with that drive and mentorship that we can move forward, and with the assistance of the private sector and the public, we can really make South Africa a great industry, especially in the water and sanitation sector.
No, great. Thanks for that presentation. The message I'm taking home is about collaboration, innovative ways of doing things, and consolidation of efforts and resources. And that essentially you've been a negative young man, but emanating from today, you're positive in such a way that you offer, you're available to offer your skills to better the country. Yeah. So thanks for that. Colleagues, there was a bit of a misunderstanding with Tumelo Khopane for him to give his input. He will join us in a minute or so. However, according to the program, we are now under discussions, and we wish to give particularly the young, not the young, but the older people to give their inputs, because I have realized that Jay gave a PowerPoint presentation and Abri gave a PowerPoint presentation, but the youth, they spoke out of their hearts. So we wish to open up for some few discussions. I know that we were gonna have a break, but I suspect that if we're to have a break, maybe we'll lose all sorts of people. So I'm gonna to suggest that take your comfort break as the programs unfolds. And in that regard, I wish then to invite colleagues to make some few observations and remarks on the basis of what they've heard. I don't know, please raise your hand if you so wish. I did see Prof. Mike Miller earlier on, but I saw he's sending a WhatsApp, not a WhatsApp, but he sent a message that he might be going off the platform. Lubabalo, the floor is yours, my leader. Lubabalo from MISA, introduce yourself and the organization you represent. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Moraka and esteemed colleagues. My name is Lubabalo Luyaba. I work for the Municipal Infrastructure Support Agent. I think I'm gonna vent my own opinions. I'm not representing the organization at this point. I think a very small input to make. So yesterday we had technical budget forum, and the topic was or is or theme rather, infrastructure asset management. And I won't go into how many engineers were in the room, but I was left quite concerned. I think I still want to keep my job, so I'll put a pin in that. And I think what I want to say is there's a quote that says, if you're not at the if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I think engineers are not at the table, and we need to ask why that is, and how do we change that. Lest we continue, and I say we because I'm an engineer, lest we continue making a noise in our own corner, and our voice won't be heard by the decision makers. I think a critical skill that I've picked up that we lack as engineers, in all our brilliance in terms of technical solutions, but strategic communication and engagement doesn't seem to be a strength that we have. You know, and it's something that we really need to improve on as a sector if we want to be at the table. And it's true. I mean, we could be righteous about it and say, well, if government doesn't listen, the country's going to fall apart. But I think we're past that point at this stage, and we need to probably reinvent ourselves to be at the table, not in the interest of being right, but in the interest of ensuring that the country moves in the direction that we'd like to see it move in. And I think that's something that we should all reflect on. So it's really amazing, and it's good that we've got the technical solutions, but if we can't package and make those palatable for those at the table, then we will continue to increase in our irrelevance as professionals. And it's something at national, it's at provincial, and it's at local government. So I think let's reflect on that and really try to improve in terms of how we get that right. And as I say, yesterday for me was just a stark reminder of how irrelevant engineers seemingly are, even on issues of infrastructure. And if we don't change that, colleagues, we're kidding ourselves. Yeah, those would be my personal comments, Mr. Muraka, not those of Misa. Thanks.
No, thanks. And I do know behind the scenes why you're saying that, but that's a discussion for another day. Let's take Jonas and then Eddie Winnings in that order.
Thanks, Chair. It's Jonas from Mwat local municipality. I would not also be representing the organization, but I wanted to add on the this issue of having untreated wastewater discharged into the receiving water bodies, the rivers. I think this is influenced by a lack of political will, just to be honest with ourselves, that it is not almost everybody who can operate and maintain our wastewater treatment works. When we check Regulation 813, it encourages the politicians to flood illiterate people into the operation and maintenance of our systems, because it still encourages people with matric to be absorbed, yet the government is pumping more money in educating people to be artisans, to be process controllers, and to be young engineers. So for so long as this status quo remains of politicians just deciding on deploying instead of employing the skill that we do have in South Africa, I think it's not going to change. We'll still have wastewater discharge into the river. I thank you, Chair.
No, thanks, Dr. Mabaso, for that input. It is obviously disheartening if the status quo will remain in terms of our political will to change the current situation. But let's steam ahead and hear from Eddie Winnings, and then I see Chris Campbell, the CEO of Cesa, also wants to weigh in. Let's take Eddie, and let's take Chris and then Jay in that order. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. I'm from a company called GLS Consulting, but had my time at the department, so quite familiar with all the speakers that have been speaking. Chris might relate to this. The tenders released from DBSA, DWAS National Planning Panels, municipalities in the last year have started putting in a section around skills transfer. And for consulting engineers, it's quite a difficult thing to be transferring skills to your client who's meant to be more knowledgeable than you, and puts us in quite a precarious position. And also skills transfer is often longer than the term of a project and broader than the terms of the project. If I need to mentor an engineer, but my project is only about asset management and he needs to get registered as a PR, it's a tricky one. So I would like to know, in the last 10 years or 15 years, especially, I think, Jay, you might have looked into it, or MISA, or have we in South Africa done a feasibility study for a training and mentoring institute for municipal water and sanitation engineers, where they can actually go on gap courses to learn how to do hydraulic modeling, to do construction management, to write terms of references. So it's almost like formal training combined with going home, mentor allocated to you, practicing in your municipality, and then finally getting your PR eng. Does anyone know if that study has ever been done?
No, thanks, Eddie, for that difficult question. We'll think about it as we move along. Let's take Chris and then Jay, and then we'll close it there and go to the next session. Chris?
Okay, thanks, Chair. I think what I'd like to share with everyone is, firstly, I think that the question from the the issue of whether a study has been done or some kind of training intervention of that nature, I can happily share with you that there are thoughts on those kind of interventions, specifically because of the limitations that exist through a contracting period, which may be too short to assist with the mentoring. I think what's very important, what we have to remember is engineering remains an applied science. So, you know, it doesn't help to have a room full of people learning how to do modeling. You got to apply it, you know, almost into a real life situation. And that's how you build up your competency. It's unfortunately not something that can be done pretty much, you know, you can do it like a pilot. A pilot will do the, you'll be sitting in a room and a simulator, but certainly you won't be let onto a plane until you've done a couple of hours on a real plane, on a real flight. But the more important initiative, which I'd like to share with everybody, William, is that, you know, I'm a firm believer of the adage. The adage says, and there's a Latin version for that, which I won't bore everybody with. It says, nothing comes from doing nothing. So I'm encouraged at the moment that through the National School of Government, myself and several other, many more learned people than myself, are on the ministerial task team dealing with the professionalization of public service. And we do, in fact, my focus is going to be on built environment professions. And to the point of one of your earlier contributors, we need to put in place the proper competencies if we're going to get the service delivery that we hope to achieve. In water specifically, you've got to have knowledgeable people, and I think what the process will seek to do is to depoliticize appointments. And you know, your engineering practitioners responsible for the engineering output in service delivery. Key to that, and we all know it, is you can't be the leader or head of a department of something you know nothing about. So a lot of that has to change if we're going to get it right. And we now have an opportunity through this framework, which the minister is very adamant about getting implemented, to almost try to reset the problem. We understand that there are too many challenges that are going to take lots of political will to overcome. But certainly if people are, you know, if they are not trainable, if they don't have the basic education, then, and they in specific departments, then, you know, it's a non-starter. And we're going to have to grapple with that in terms of getting it right, getting the structures right, getting the people, the appropriate people in their correct positions to be able to pull off this turnaround. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to stop there because I could go on for a long time, but I'm encouraged that there is political will to not just talk about professionalizing the state. And we're not only talking, we're talking professionalization as a behavioral trait for a start, but also competency in respect of registration with professional councils, and then also fixing up the unintended consequences of you know, good ideas like OSD, which has gone pear-shaped. So there is some hope on the horizon, not like a light switch. It's unfortunately not going to be instantaneous, but if we start working at it, we will be able to achieve that turnaround. Thank you, William.
No, thanks, Chris, for those inputs and comments, and certainly we look forward for you to influence the professionalization of the public sector. Marcio also sits there, and it's something that we will be advocating for. We are obviously running out of time, but Jay, you'll be the last, and then directly after that, let's move to the other session. Jay?
Yeah, so look, we shouldn't, we've complained a lot about our poor governance, our poor governance situation. I don't think, in the past, it was better. It's just that, the older guys found a way in an innovative manner to deal with that governance. We're in a situation now where the new leadership is black, so we need to innovate ourselves, on how we build our own relationships and behaviors to tackle this new way of governance, because their lens is very, very different compared to what was there in the past. And I don't think we should benchmark, that, the past was better kind of thing, etc. We should see it as a new opportunity and a new challenge, and find the mechanisms and the mechanics to work on that pathway. And that's what I like what Tevin was saying, is that, the younger people, have a better opportunity, and they don't have any of the hang-ups, etc., to actually push the boundaries of being innovative in this governance environment that is a little bit challenging for us older folks, okay? And find that rhythm that brings engineering back into the forefront, and build that confidence, that the system starts recognizing that, hey, we need these guys more than what we thought. So I just want to leave that little bit thought with you all, that there is an opportunity, and we should take it, by its horn, and I always use the word innovate and create in working with this new order that is out there. Thank you.
No, thanks, Jay, for those inputs. Colleagues, I wish us to move into the next session, which is essentially framing some of the solutions that we might have to consider. And to help us do that, I wish to invite Dr. Kuzwayo from Joburg Water to deliver his input in this particular important session of what can we do differently. And importantly, that I'm sure as these processes unfolds, we'll probably look at a way of reclaiming the status that engineers have. Dr. Kuzwayo, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can. Are you able to put it on the, but it's fine, because otherwise I'll mess up your, please proceed.
Anyway, yes, thank you, sir. I suppose from our side, we'll be looking at a sort of a different angle on how one can look at innovation, and tying in, of course, with engineering. But specifically, I'll be focusing on what we've done, or at least the approach that we're taking within the Joburg water space, in terms of how we look at engineering, and how we embrace the idea of innovation within that space to create solutions. Anyway, so basically, one thing that we need to define, that I've seen around, which actually is a problem, is that people struggle to define what innovation is in terms of the space that they occupy, especially when one looks at a municipal space, where they look at it from a case of we just service deliver, and we don't really look at anything beyond that point. The Joburg Water route is a bit different, where they've recognized the importance of innovation within a delivery space, where of course we found a way to define ourselves in a manner which we can look at providing solutions to our services, of course, as well as our support services, where I guess we've defined innovation as the ability to basically implement processes that are meant to be able to improve ourselves through various routes and various bits of information. In that, we've brought in ourselves, we've looked at innovation more as a core part of the business, where of course, we're not just looking at it as a case of solving a problem in a plant or basically trying to fix a pipeline, more a case of how does a whole company pull together in the sense of a total management plan to ensure that innovation is a total outlook on how we can improve the whole process. Yes, in some cases, one can say that could be a radical innovation. But for my environment as a water utility, our principle is that we're looking at how then do we find ways within our cultural systems to try and improve what we have, such that, of course, we don't have to go out there every time we've got a broken glass, so to speak. What we've seen out there, of course, with most municipalities is that people tend to think solving belongs to somebody else. Solving belongs to institutions of higher learning. Solving belongs to consultants. But that's not the case in most cases, because we are in a space where sometimes we better understand what the issues are within our spaces. So that is actually one of the bigger challenges that we have, or at least that we've come across within the operational space, where how then do we look at solving problems within our spaces? Because we do have knowledge. We do basically employ people who have skill sets that have the ability to actually solve the problem. Most of the time, we'd leave somebody within our systems and go find a consultant group to come back to us and then deliver to us what we can deliver ourselves. Of course, at times, this is because of the policies and regulations. But of course, these can only be basically improved or at least adapted through insightful internal systems. Basically, what we've done in terms of embracing technology, or at least innovation in Joburg Water, is that we've looked at the cost-benefit system, or at least the values and benefits within how we can look at our approaches towards innovation. Both, again, and I'll repeat this, in solving the delivery issues as well as the support structures. So the Innovation Office at Joburg Water has been provided a huge segment of operation where it's able to look at problems, finding ways to deal with, of course, through WRC, dealing with higher education institutions, and whichever stakeholder groups are involved, including Cesa, in how then we deal with issues to try and deal with the issues we have on site. To a point where the Office of Innovation Technology is now become an academic office within the operational space of Joburg Water. That makes sense. So that is the embracing of innovation that we've taken from a Joburg Water point of view. The journey, of course, to do this hasn't been easy. It's been long because it's very difficult to change existing cultures and traditional cultures. And of course, this concept was started by people who actually had visions with regards to how this could work. Clearly, there have been issues over the years, and I'm not certainly saying that Joburg Water is now perfect and actually functioning in a manner which is ideal, but it's a manner in which we are planning to go forward and how we're solving issues with regards to both our operations and how best to deliver water to the city of Joburg, our community. And of course, over the years, the individuals who were there have had to come together to actually fine-tune the system such that, of course, what do we need to ensure this office improves? Who do we get there? And then what qualifications are relevant in order for us to be able to deal with this journey? And of course, so with my current sitting in the office, it's been a journey where I'm able now to see how best we can go forward in pushing the journey such that Joburg Water does perform in an innovative space and it does embrace all the elements within innovation. Because for me and Joburg Water, to be honest, the innovation space, it does form the core function of a business. For whether you are in operations, whether you're in legal, whether you're in project management, we need to find a way to improve yourself such that the company can perform. So that is the overarching goal of how Joburg Water is looking to deal with things. And of course, excuse me, there are clear goals which have been defined in order to be able to do so. And for any organization which is going to do the same thing, it should be prudent for them to actually not have goals in place, of course, in line with what they have and their understanding of their own situations. Because you can't expect, for instance, a small remote municipality to try and behave in a manner which a metro such as Joburg or Tshwane or Cape Town might do so. So defining those parameters is very important to ensure that, of course, you're always trying to achieve what you have in mind. And of course, you're not overburdening yourself into what you're trying to go into. And of course, what does it entail? What does innovation entail when it comes to Joburg Water? I've listed a couple of, or more than a couple, to be honest, of our pointers on how Joburg Water now is looking into innovation and what innovation can do within the company. And if one looks at the list comprehensively, it's obvious that it covers basically both the upstream and the downstream routes into how the company functions as a whole. So basically, even when there are strategic meetings, strategic gatherings, innovation needs to form a core part of that. It's able to basically branch into all the different department or different subdivisions of the company. And of course, they give advice and improve what services that there are in their spaces. So I'm not going to go through the whole list as is, but I'm hoping you'll give an idea of how broad one can look at innovation in a space where you're actually dealing with services. And of course, if you're in a water sector, it is more imperative that you understand fully what you're trying to achieve. Now, how did this approach come about? Basically, from a Joburg Water side, the allowance, so to speak, to allow for the Office of Innovation to perform its task. This vision, of course, must go from top down, where, of course, the MD and the CEO of Joburg Water are very strong on problem solving. They're very strong on how do we get solutions to ensure that, of course, number one, we do minimize losses if we are finding solutions to simple things. Of course, we also create a better culture when you ask people to be involved in their own environment. When you empower individuals with the space that we're in, it's easier for them to understand fully what they're trying to do. Because a huge part of running a water utility space is having a huge personnel contingency. And they all need, of course, to be involved in how we deliver water. That if they are happy, the odds are they will get value for their involvement. And it's easier then to ensure that we go forward as a system. But this narrative has to come from top down, where people understand fully that they are being empowered to try and solve issues. Of course, the idea, which is also a bit different through the traditional ways of thinking, is that an organization such as ourselves should be able to be self-reliant and self-sustained to some level. Because, for instance, I'll give you a simple example. You know, when a pipe bursts in a treatment plant or something, the first thing to do is to call somebody and then get an RFQ going and get a consultant to come through. Whereas you have somebody already there who can easily go find a spanner and fix the pipe. But those routes have been taken away through, of course, many processes, including policy. But of course, we are able now to go back and say, as Joburg Water, how best can we deal with this issue? Can we do a feasibility study into the costs that are related if we were to get somebody from outside versus the cost we would incur ourselves if we had to use our own resources to try and fix the issue? Of course, the aim primarily being able to fix the problems ourselves, being able to also make sure that we foster a culture of creation. And of course, what are the realities that come with such an approach? Basically, the innovation should be embraced company-wide for it to be effective. Otherwise, if you're working in a silo, you're not going to achieve much. Because again, one of the things I've had to do in the company since coming through is to create a network within all the departments, fully understanding what we are trying to achieve, so that if they do have a problem, they do have an issue, if they do have an idea, there is an office which is able to percolate throughout, being able to ensure that their goals can be met, or at least their wishes can basically put forward. If you don't do that, people then cannot come to you, because again, we always have red tape within our spaces, especially in a municipal space, where each policy governs with each department. But of course, if you have an umbrella innovation system, or at least innovation environment, that's able to go anywhere and transgress all those boundaries. So one of the areas where we should improve the Joburg Water is being able to at least create this network where we can talk the same language in order to solve issues. And of course, the benefits are there, but of course, the returns might not be there for now, but in the future, it's easy to see how we can benefit from understanding, or at least using this approach. Again, the other issue is that innovation is not understood by most individuals. When people think innovation, they think some designer somewhere in Silicon Valley or in Verts or UP. They don't understand that innovation is any manner in which you can improve a system by virtue of applying yourself. So by understanding the fact that innovation is a tool that everybody can actually be involved in, makes life easier for them to be able to actually deal and just be involved and fix simple things within their systems. Anyway, again, innovation needs to be defined within the scope of the organization. I've already sort of got into this slightly in terms of you can't overshoot yourself to a point where you basically achieve what you're trying to achieve because you've overstretched the mark. So those are the realities that we found can work within our systems. But again, it's very important to understand that one needs to understand themselves, their environment, and what they're trying to deliver for them to be able to define what innovation is to their company or the organization. Anyway, I don't want to take too long. I want to actually share that bit in terms of how one can embrace innovation within a water service space, such that in the end, the company can improve itself. And all these can be integrated within an engineering forum, because of course, if you walk in within the utility space, you're delivering services, you have plants, meaning you're mainly dealing with engineers, okay, scientists, of course, from a water quality perspective, and of course, process controllers who are also engineers. So the idea is to ensure that we have a culture of thinking that fosters the embracement of solutions. Hope that makes sense. Thank you.
No, thanks a lot, Dr. Kuzayo. I mean, clearly you are one of the municipalities that is privileged to have a dedicated resource like yourself to drive innovation. Imagine a municipality where I come from, Moretele. I'm sure they're not thinking deeply about such, and we need to look at a way of how we work collectively then to promote innovation and technology in our municipalities. And I think there's a process between Salga and SAICI to take that forward. With that said, colleagues, the next item is quite a crucial one in my own opinion. A subject that has been talked about nationally and internationally, issues of asset management and operation and maintenance. And to give us his thoughts about how we can do things differently going forward in that space, I wish to invite Mpho from Zotari Consulting Engineers to give us his thoughts of how can we do things differently. Mpho, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm not sure if you can see my screen. Can you?
Yes, we can. Just put it on slide mode, please, if you don't mind, Mpho. Thank you.
I did click a slide mode. There it's
There
gone.
we go. Great.
Sorry, I have to apologize. I didn't join the earlier session because I was in a meeting with various clients, and I'm actually joining you from the site office, and the connection there isn't that stable. So I'm not gonna switch on my video. I can momentarily if you wish, but it gets a little bit blurred, so I don't think you can see anything. I did turn on my video. Sorry about that. Okay,
please proceed.
Yeah, my name it's Mpho Rampau. I'm currently based in the Zutari Cape Town office. I lead, just as an introduction, I lead our water business across the African space. So I'm the head of our water unit. And in a week's time, I'll be relocating to Gauteng for those that are interested in catching up with me later. So I'm passionate about water in general. My specialty is basically water treatment and wastewater treatment, and that's where my passion actually lies. I've studied a lot on wastewater treatment, and yeah, especially the biological aspect of it. Yeah, at the moment, I'm involved in basically delivering large infrastructure projects for small municipalities as well as large scale and metro municipalities. And I've worked across Australia, New Zealand, Southern Africa as well. And I've helped, companies with triple P contracts in the UK, operating as concessionaires to meet what is expected of them. So this aspect that I'll be talking to you about, it's something that is very broad. When Godfrey asked me to talk about it, I said, I'd like to understand a little bit of what he's asking for, because I don't want to go and talk about the stuff that it's business as usual. Maybe before we go on, I see there is a hand that is raised. I'm not sure if that's directed to me before I get into the presentation. Is that a mistake or is it?
No, that's a legacy hand. Paul,
okay, all right.
Proceed.
Yeah, so I thought I will not talk about business as usual stuff, but rather look far ahead and maybe share some of the things that other parts of the world are doing, and try and bring those close to home as well, where we've got challenges with policies and and frameworks. But I'm not going to go into the details about that. So the slide is not moving. Shucks. Oh dear. Okay, I'll just do it like that. All right, the overview is I'll just touch on just give you a context and the footprint of what is at stake here in terms of our infrastructure in South Africa and the current approaches that have been adopted to deal with infrastructure stuff. And also just look at, maybe other ways of looking at it to help what we already have in place. So firstly, I think, we need to go back to the basics. I think the Constitution provides for every individual in our country to have some sort of access to basic water and sanitation. We know that there's a lot of backlog, which maybe influence decisions to go a certain way, but I'm not here to talk about that. And also the FMA, especially section 63.2 talks about, a proper way of accounting and managing, the infrastructure that we have. So there is a lot in terms of policies and legislation to deal with that, and it's also well documented in the National Water Act. The other thing that it's very widely publicized is the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals. You'll see that the water and sanitation is basically at the forefront of that, at the center of all those development goals. So if we have to now bring everything back to home, noting that we've got all of these things, have we got an understanding of what we have in our system? The last time I checked, we had at least 2,000 wastewater treatment works, whether, you're talking about the evaporation oxidation pond system. This excludes the septic tank, of course, and all the way to your more advanced wastewater treatment plants. And we have also at least 950 potable water treatment works as well in the country. And something that it might be quite exciting for those that are not aware is we've got at least 50,000 kilometers of water and sanitation infrastructure network. The question is, with all of this, sophisticated infrastructure network, is what are we doing about it? Because there's a lot of capital that has been injected in there. We also have, at least 500 state-owned dams with a huge capacity of at least 37 million cubes. Just to give people a refresher, that's equivalent of many Olympic-sized swimming pools. And the other thing that it's actually quite interesting and fascinating is we, as stakeholders and custodians of this infrastructure, we've also, in the next few years, we're going to be spending in the order of 700 billion rand to bring about, new infrastructure in order to make sure that people have got basic needs, basic water and sanitation, and also to meet some of the sustainable development goals. So it's very crucial that we play that proper custodian roles, especially if we're going to be spending an additional 700 billion rand, and this is just the capex on the new infrastructure. So what are immediate challenges that we face in the country is we've got I think it's fair to say our problems are well documented, but I just thought I'll just give a refresher. It's, our water resources are poorly managed, especially your wastewater treatment works, because no one actually pays proper attention compared to your water treatment works, because those people are interested in because of the water that they drink. But when you look at the two brothers or cousins, if you want to call it that, The one that seems to be forgotten a lot is the wastewater treatment works, because it's actually seen as a waste. And I actually don't like that term. I see it as a resource facility or factory that we can actually, harness a lot of stuff that we're consuming on a daily basis, especially if you look at that and juxtapose it with the whole circular economy stuff. So the wastewater treatment works are in dire needs, and that is well documented. And we've got poor management across the whole spectrum of our infrastructure. So reticulation, it's one of them. Whether that's just sewage or potable water, it's leaking everywhere. Pressure management, it's not the way it should be. There are some metros in the country that have got in excess of 40% leaks through their system. So basically we treating the water and just dumping that into the ground. So we're not looking after our stuff. So there's shortage of skills and weak institutional capacity. There is actually poor planning by both ourselves as consultants and also the clients on the other side. And that's basically likely to not understanding what the public actually wants. So it's something that we need to look at. We need to look at the whole life cycle costing of the projects before we actually embark on this solution. We mustn't just look at the CAPEX. The other thing that's becoming more and more of a challenge is the inability of a state-owned, government to raise capital because of undesirable gearing ratio. What that refers to, basically, it's your loan to debt ratio, as well as your ability of your ratepayers to actually bring back money into the fiscus. And the other thing that actually just hamstrung everything is just the corruption, which we shouldn't be even talking about it now. And the other thing is lack. Now, when we bring this to looking after our infrastructure, we've got poor record keeping of our asset and data, so which is actually crucial if we are going to do a good job of looking after our infrastructure. So most of those things I've spoken about, but if you go back and look at exactly what is this operation and maintenance, this actually refers to all the activities that are needed to run a water supply system, whether it be a water sanitation scheme or a water treatment plant, but it excludes construction of new facilities. I think that's a simple explanation that I can give, but I don't think it's well understood, because the diagram below actually shows what needs to happen, when we look at the asset before we can even go to the operation and maintenance. We need to plan it properly. We're actually good at maybe acquiring new assets. We've got a very good level, some sort of a good level of planning, but when it actually comes to scrapping those assets or actually looking after them, we're very poor there. And most of the time that doesn't even enter into the discussion. And it's something that we need to start now pushing more and more forward. And I know why this doesn't even make it, because it's not necessarily a cheap way of looking at things, and people just want quick fix solutions. And unfortunately, once you've committed to an infrastructure, you need to look after it. It's like giving birth to a child. So you can't just give birth and say, from now onwards, you're on your own. So you have to look after that child until they're at a point where they can take care of themselves. We've got a very good asset registers and framework and policies, so which I'm not going to dwell into, but the question is, that unfortunately has been reduced into a tick box exercise, and it shouldn't be a tick box exercise. The blue drop and green drop system it's actually a quite great initiative, but I think it's not properly been used the way it was intended to be used. And the other thing, it's, maintenance only happens when things fail, and by then it's too late. So we need to, the operation part, it's like it's forgotten. So before you can operate, before you can maintain something, you actually need to understand how it operates or how it works. So I think since this is a broad subject, so I just thought I would just challenge each one of us to just make sure, especially those that are in the consulting space, to make sure that when we plan or offer solutions, that those are fit for purpose, that we don't go there with our own preconceived ideas of giving our stakeholders something that it's not going to be fit for purpose. For example, we need to design things that are easy to operate and maintain, and they need to be location specific. It has to be different when you're designing for a rural place where you know you're not going to get highly skilled personnel to look after the stuff. And also when it comes to urban or your metros, where solutions tend to be very sophisticated, we need to look at the whole procurement and supply chain processes when we put our solutions in place. And another way of doing things is to standardize the design and make sure that you've got redundancies in whatever you're offering, or maybe level of reliabilities to maybe offset the delays that might be caused by supply chain regulations and other things. Just make sure all of this is factored into the planning. I know all of this basically increases the cost, but it's actually great for the infrastructure. So organizing, like, the O&M does not actually require a huge task. It requires us to ask a very deliberate way of doing things. And I mean, it's easy. We need to know what we're doing and when and who it's for and with what we have. So I've already touched on those things. But the most important thing that excites me, I know that my colleague, Dr. Kuzwayo, initially was talking about innovation. And that basically goes into the whole digital way of doing things. I know this is tough for smaller municipalities or for rural areas, but it does help. And unfortunately, most of the urban areas where you actually require a level of help, we still rely on human resources, and those human resources are not even the right caliber of resources because of lack of capacity or skills that haven't been passed on to people that are coming to operate our system. But for rural communities, I've seen systems, basic systems operating via GSMs and cell phone networks. But for our urban areas where things are complicated, that's where you actually need the help of digital tools to drive efficiency. The whole thing of digital transformation to drive efficiency via control systems and digital twins becomes more and more of a solution that needs to be investigated and basically put forward for complicated systems. And most of the systems are the ones that cost lots and lots of billions, that by the time they fail, if we don't look after them, it's as good as basically scrapping them and putting in another expensive infrastructure. So we need to maybe get into the habit of technology in order to drive a proper operation and maintenance. The other thing that this does, it gives you all the information that you need, because the framework, it's already there via the asset management registers and other platforms. So this can be used to do preventative maintenance by making sure that you can bring equipment offline before they actually fail and look after them. By that way, you can prolong their life, expectancies. So we also need to start thinking about capacity building. If that includes triple Ps, or it includes having a maintenance, operation and maintenance contract after an infrastructure project has been constructed. We need to pursue that to make sure that the stuff is not left to ruin. I've seen there are a few municipalities that I've seen doing this. I haven't done it myself, but I've seen it, where they've got operation and maintenance contract, and they actually save a lot of money through that system because things last longer and they're not left to ruin. And by that, I don't mean privatization of the municipal infrastructure. It's in a relationship, public partnership, private partnership, where they both actually run the plant, with the end result being that the municipality personnel, where they lack capacity, that whole resource is transferred to them to run. So I've seen those systems working very well. It's something that we really need to do. So I've just given a brief background. So this one, I'll share this presentation so that you can look at this at your leisure. But basically, I've just, based on my experience with what I'm involved in, from small project of like probably a few 100,000 to like 2.5 billion rand that I've been working with, I've seen that the process is exactly the same that you have to go through. And there's so many complex things that you have to look after at the design and the life, planning the life of a project. And I've just put a complicated slide there. It's what we all go through. It's just that maybe it might just look confusing to you, but that's what it is. And the way it started with something as complicated as this. And the way I described it was, we get to a point where no one knows what they're doing. And it's that area where you see that spider web, where things basically just go back and forth. But if we just maybe take a little bit of a break and just say, ask ourselves a few questions on what's required, that, you know, that end there turns into something truly amazing for our stakeholders. And this is a journey that needs to be taken by both service providers and as well as the clients, having these the stakeholders at the center of all of these issues. So this brings me to what I was talking about. So we need to, the best way, because we've got the resources, we've got people, but we're relying a lot on people. And I don't think that's sustainable going into the future. The frameworks are there. All the processes that we need to follow are there, but I've got a feeling that most people don't use the stuff because it's all saved on the computer or it's all written somewhere. The best way is to use the control systems or digital systems that have been installed or can be installed in most of this infrastructure at a fraction of a cost to save a lot of money down the line. And there's so many things. We can look at industrial Internet of Things suited for, you know, the environment that we work in, whether it's a rural or urban area, so that still works. The whole data management and insights, there is a lot of data that it's logged, but it's not logged properly. It's not in a way that is friendly to use. It requires a lot of mining when it's there. So we need to start moving into intelligent ways and intelligent platforms that are useful for what we want to see. There's no use having all the electronic equipment on water infrastructure if you can't use it. So it's there already. We just need to take it a notch further to make it in a way that we can use it. And that will lead to us having these dashboards in an interactive way. And those dashboards can actually be used to set KPIs for your plant personnel, including their managers or people that are custodian of those infrastructure. And it also helps to you know, deal with preventative maintenance because people can actually see what's going on, you know. So I mean, there is a lot. I mean, the framework that we have on asset management system talks about organizational structures, leadership, planning, operation and performance evaluation and improvement. All of that stuff can be condensed into a digital platform that helps everyone to see what's going on without actually looking over people's shoulders. So that's my story about ways of improving it. So if there's one thing that I just want you to take from this thing, it's the framework and the policies there, but we just need to make sure that the data that we have, it's in a useful format. And the only way we can do that is to move things appropriately to digital platforms. Thank you very much.
No, great. Thanks, Mpho, for that excellent, insightful presentation that is beginning to really shape the direction we need to take as a country. And I mean, I would imagine if we're to employ this as a policy framework in the country, what it will do in terms of infrastructure management going forward. And I think these are some of the issues that we'll probably have to advocate for as Salga, working together with Cesa and other relevant stakeholders. So thank you so very much for that excellent presentation. It has certainly opened up the journey for us to take some of these things forward. The last presentation from our side in terms of what we need to do next or what we need to do differently is from Dr. Joe Burgess, who's a scientist by profession, and she's going to tell us what are the innovative solutions that are out there to help us improve water management. Dr. Burgess, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Hopefully you are about to see my first slide, and now that I'm screen sharing, I can't see what you can see. So
yes, we
can you
see
just
the
let
slide.
me know?
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, then I'm going to talk a little bit about access to technological and innovative solutions, and then wrap up with the role of engineers versus innovation integrators. So, as William's mentioned, I'm representing Isle Utilities. I'm in the Pretoria office, and we are, my slides are not moving. Okay, my slides are moving. Good stuff. We are a relatively small company, and the map is a little bit misleading because even before the pandemic, we all worked from home. So we're quite scattered around the world. There are about 70 people in the company as a whole. And the green pins on the map show you where we have businesses, offices registered, and the yellow light bulbs show you where we have activities. So technology approval group locations, workshops, events, and that kind of thing. And our reason for existence, so what we are here for, is to identify challenges in the water and wastewater and sanitation service provision sector and other associated sectors. We identify, we scout for novel technologies all the time. And we've got a team of scientists and engineers around the world that speak between them about 25 languages. And you can see from the map how diversely they're spread. And among that team, we always are looking for technologies which we undertake technical and commercial due diligence on as a routine. That's what we do all the time. Our role is to connect those technologies with the people that need them. So through collaborative forums, we undertake collaborative evaluation of the technologies that are emerging. These are a disruptive, leapfrog, various stages of readiness, and we introduce them to the people that need them. And that's basically what we do. And we do it through two main mechanisms. We have a range of forums called the technology approval groups. And these are membership forums which end users of technologies can join. So we have 14 of them around the world. 2 of those are in South Africa. One is the municipal, so that's water and wastewater service providers. And the other one is industrial, which includes people from the water sector that want to join, but it also includes oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, pulp and paper, the metal industry, that kind of thing. And the idea is that for each forum meeting, and each forum meets twice a year, we present a long list, so a catalogue of 10 brand new technologies that they haven't seen before, which are available locally, that meet a local need, and they get to vote on what they want to hear. And the members of each forum vote for 5 technologies that they want to learn about. And then we coach the technology providers to present a good technical commercial presentation. So actual performance data, genuine cost information, genuine evidence-based claims, rather than just, it's not a sales pitch. It's a much more robust presentation. We then shoo them out of the room, either the virtual or the physical room, and we basically talk about them behind their backs. So we get everyone in the group to come together and provide this collaborative review. The other thing that we have to make innovative technologies and know-how accessible is a range of online tools. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about those in a moment. But you can think of them like Property 24, but for technologies. So the TAG technology portal has about 1,200 technologies in it that have already been through due diligence, so we know they work. We have CAT Wizard, which is the condition assessment tool wizard, and it's specifically for condition assessment of linear assets, so pipelines, effectively collection and distribution networks. And those are subscription services. And we do some other bits and bobs as well, some training and consulting, and that's not particularly relevant for today. When we look at innovation in the water sector, it's primarily driven by, well, necessity is the mother of invention. So the drivers are changing environmental policy, so ever stricter legislation, minimizing cost, or enhanced performance. So this is where companies need to reduce their operational costs, but still meet the same output requirements, or they need to comply with more stringent legislation or with corporate goals, and they need to do better, but for the same costs. So those are the drivers. The barriers to innovation are how long it takes to bring something new onto the market, typically 17 to 20 years from inception at the research stage to actually off-the-shelf standard technology. And what is another major barrier is the level of investment that's required into a new technology that may not even work in the end. Most research doesn't work, and I say that as a researcher with a very sad heart. But that's the point of research. If we knew what would work, we would just do that. We wouldn't have to have research to try other things. So that links into that third barrier, the technology and market risk. Now, the ways in which ISLE provides access to innovation are, well, numerous and varied. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the online tools. We have 3 distinct online tools. And the first one is the technology portal, which is a searchable online database of just over 1,000 pre-assessed technologies. And this is sort of the general portal. It has everything in it. Number 2 is the COVID-19 portal. And this is something that we only created last year for obvious reasons. And it is pre-assessed technologies specifically to manage, destroy, mitigate the impact of the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19. And then the third one on the list is the condition assessment technologies portal, which is a narrower focus than the tag technology portal, but goes into more detail on the technologies that it includes. So this is what the tag portal looks like. It's a bit like Auto Trader. It's a searchable database. You can ask it using the categories listed on the left-hand side for the kind of thing you're looking for. You might be looking specifically for sensors for use in a clean water network. You might be looking for, I don't know, a sludge dewatering technology that has something that conventional technologies don't have. So you can put in filters, and it's also a searchable database using where the word desalination is in the top left corner. So if, for example, somebody comes to you and they're trying to sell you this amazing new technology and it's the next best thing and all that stuff, if you are a technology approval group member, you can come into the database, put the company name or the technology name in that box and see if it comes up. And if it does, then it means we've assessed it and there's a fact sheet available in there. And those fact sheets are written by our staff. They're not just marketing information from the tech providers. And there are also additional private documents in there which are available to members. So things like the outcomes of case studies undertaken by other water utilities. So the report from the hosting utility, not from the tech provider. So you get a feel of what happened in their previous pilots and demonstrations from the end user's perspective. The second one that I mentioned is the COVID-19 portal. And there are 4 categories of technology here. So we have detection and testing, we have removal and deactivation, remote control, monitoring and automation, and contingency management. And in those last 2 categories, the technologies are not necessarily specific to this pandemic. A lot of these technologies are useful for general resilience and risk mitigation in all sorts of crises. And then the last one I just wanted to mention is the CAT Wizard, the condition assessment tools. And this one goes into much more detail on a subset of technologies that's in the general portal. So in this one, you can see the categories on the left-hand side of the screen are somewhat different. You can select according to the pipe material, the supplier, if you know a supplier, what kind of principle you want the technology to work with. And further down, if we were able to scroll down, you would see things like you can select the region in which the technology is available or a price range. So those are the online tools, and this backdrop of constant techno-economic assessment, due diligence assessment, and population of the portals, which happens all the time, is what lies behind the technology approval groups. The technology approval groups, as I say, are operational around the world. The technologies which are presented are are assessed for application in the particular region where they're presented. So we don't take a technology which is a good tech, but let's say it's very specific to the USA context. We don't paste it across the rest of the world. So we're constantly searching the globe for emerging technologies. We're constantly assessing them. If they aren't any good, we don't put them in the portal and we don't bring them to the meetings. If they are good, but they're not relevant to a particular location, so let's say they're not available in South Africa yet, then we don't bring them to the South African meeting. We select the technologies based on the ones which are of most interest to the forum members, and the 5 most popular which are voted in through the mechanism that I described earlier are the ones that are presented at the meeting. In the meeting, we coach the presenters very closely, so they have to stick strictly to time, they have to provide genuine evidence, and they have to undertake to answer Q&A at the time, but we also undertake a SWOT analysis on each technology behind closed doors, and we give them feedback from that analysis, and they have to respond to that as well. After the meetings, there are always follow-up cycles of ongoing activities, such as things like setting up collaborative trials. If there are 2 or more members of a forum that are interested in testing a tech, then we can halve the costs for each of them by designing and hosting a collaborative trial. And we find our technologies from around the world, academic institutes, technology accelerators from within the approval network itself, all sorts. The kinds of technologies are broken down into the pie chart that you see in front of you now. A lot of work at the moment is on network and asset management, and a lot is on monitoring. And that really speaks to the digitization of the industry. We look particularly for cutting edge innovation, but at technology readiness level 7, 8, and 9 for these forums. So it needs to be something that is deployable. It must be proven in an operational environment. It's not just something where you've got one lab or one on-site pilot plant that's small. It has to have been done properly at least once somewhere in the world, and it must be available here. We do a lot of that by bringing standard practice in from other sectors. A lot of the leakage reduction technology that we're importing from oil and gas, for example, has been very well developed there because their product is worth a lot more than water. So a lot of their condition assessment tools for pipelines, leakage detection and prevention is far in advance of the water sector. But their best practice, their common practice can become our best practice just because they've already done the R&D investment. So those are the kinds of things that we can bring in. One example, which you may or may not have heard of, is the Syrinx trunk minder. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the slides, but this is a nice example of how this mechanism can bring technologies into the water sector. So the Syrinx trunk minder was first presented in the UK. It was originally a British invention, and it was first presented at the UK Technology Approval Group in 2007. It monitors trunk mains for small leaks that escalate into bursts. So it's not your traditional leak detector. It's a sensor-based technology. It's no longer a new technology, but it was at the time. And the first trials were undertaken with 2 of the large utilities in its home country of the UK. Now, when I talk about the timeline required for research and development, I'll tell you what happened with Syrinx. Its first investment was 2007 when it got a government grant from Innovate UK, and it was presented at UK TAG. In 2011, IL did some work for the company, so some consulting services, and we did a market entry study and a competitor analysis study for them. And we showed them what the attributes were of the competing technologies and how they could carve out a niche for themselves. They then, as a result of that market analysis, decided to first expand into Asia Pacific. So in 2012, they were accepted to present at the Australia and Asia Technology Approval Group meetings, and they set up partnerships with local agents in the Asia Pacific region. In 2013, they looked at Europe, having set up an office in the Netherlands, and that secured an investment for them of 43 million to undertake some network pilot trials for Brabant water in mainland Europe. As a follow-on from that, in 2013-14, they expanded into the American market, and now they have about $400,000 per annum revenue in that market. So you'll see that whereas the the intuitive approach would have been start in the UK, spread to Europe, which is nearest, then spread across the English-speaking world. That's not the way it happened. Asia Pacific was the most receptive market for them, so they went there first. And now they have an office in Singapore with staff that speak Mandarin and Cantonese, because they have a lot of business in People's Republic of China. Their expansion into America went south to Texas Tag, and they got another investment from the Texan Grid for $1.5 million. And then basically they're up and running. They showcase at Singapore International Water Week with their Singaporean staff, and they had a 3-day-long show, and now they're deployed in hundreds of systems. But this has taken over 10 years, and this is what we consider an accelerated pathway. So for them, it's been a 10-year journey from 2007 to 2017 to take their technology from R&D phase into an off-the-shelf tech. And the things that we have not done for them include engineering design. We can scout for disruptive technologies, and we do that all the time. We assess them, but we're not civil engineers. We don't do civil works. We don't build wastewater or water treatment works. And this is where we need to integrate with the members of Cesa and the engineering community. Otherwise, these amazing new technologies, even if they're brilliant, can never be put on the ground, because we don't have the people with boots on the ground and the expertise to integrate new technologies into existing or new asset bases. That is my last slide. So thank you very, very much for your attention and the opportunity to speak, and I will stop there.
No, thanks, Joe, for that presentation. And essentially, colleagues, what we were trying to do there is to expose your good selves that there are, all sorts of technological ways and means of improving what we're currently doing. And I mean, in this session, you would have noted that the emphasis has been on tech and innovation, tech and innovation, tech and innovation. And hence, as Salga, together with Cesa, we are exploring a way of working together in ensuring that going forward, we introduce innovative solutions in how the consulting engineer fraternity designs infrastructure. Yeah, so that's it. I wish to leave it at that for now. We are running out of time. However, we literally have 3 minutes for this particular session. And I wish to abuse my chairpersonship here and invite Lubabalo to say a word or two about asset management and O&M of the work that they're doing at NISA. Lubabalo?
Thanks, Mr. Moraka, and thanks for the 2 to 3 minutes. I think I don't have a presentation because I'm youth. I think you've set that tone already, so I'll claim to be youth at least. So I hope I still look young. So yeah, I think the problem statement that we posed ourselves is, how do we get the state to use data and information for evidence-based decision making, specifically as it pertains to infrastructure? And what we've been trying to do is to push reforms. I think Paul correctly pointed out that the Municipal Finance Management Act, Section 63, talks about looking after assets, but the interpretation of that, which links to my earlier comment about where the power lies, has been exclusively accounting based, such that all rewards and consequences are in an accounting sense, but a municipality can get away with actually not looking after its infrastructure. And what we've tried to do in this particular instance is to say, working with Salga and other sector departments, how do we begin to improve that? And I think the innovation in this, in our context, because I think innovation is creative problem solving, whatever the context you face, is successful implementation of infrastructure policy reforms. And I'd argue that that's the task of an engineer in the public sector. So what we've done is to come up with the program that's still under development for specifically municipal infrastructure asset management. And what we're saying there is that we need to move away from the focus of exclusively developing new infrastructure and then neglecting it. Because I think if we fundamentally go back to the Constitution, reliable service provision is either explicit or implicit. And reliable service provision is not only that the infrastructure is there, but it's actually performing at the levels that it should. And what we found is that in most municipalities, that is not happening. And the question was, what can and should we do to start to change that? So we've got a program that's basically standing on 5 legs. What do we need to do at a policy and a governance level? What do we need to do at a people and a leadership level? What do we need to do at a data and an information level? And what do we need to do at a planning and decision-making level? And then obviously contributing to asset management practices. And the lesson learned here was that previously, we've gone with an approach that doesn't factor in change management or the context in which we operate. And that often stifles any sort of reform or changes that we try to bring into public infrastructure management. And so with this particular one, we're trying to actually have a broad approach that considers all of those. So practically, as a state, we're often accused of doing nothing or moving very slowly, which is not always false, but we're not here for that today. We've looked at the largest conditional infrastructure grant, which is the municipal infrastructure grant, and tried to make changes there to actually explicitly now say the job of the grant is not to just put infrastructure there, which becomes white elephants, but we need to actually make sure that infrastructure is looked after. And there's changes at a policy level or in the wording of the framework itself. At the level of the strategic goals, we've added something that says we need to subsidize the development of asset management plans for infrastructure servicing for poor households. And the truth is that planning alone is not adequate. We need to do a bit more, but this is the concession that we could get from a treasury that has no infrastructure expertise yet is tasked with the final say on decisions that have a direct bearing on public infrastructure, but that's a story for another day. So we've made, at least for now, that provision specifically in the MIG. And the idea that we're going towards as government is to say, we want to get to a point where we can say the value of municipal infrastructure is, as a bad example, from current estimates in the audited financials, we're looking at about 600 billion. If you've got 600 billion across A, B, C, and D municipalities, how much is needed to effectively operate and maintain that infrastructure? And once you've got an answer to that, we then look at how can municipalities raise that money. But fundamentally, what we're saying is, and we agree on this with the Treasury, is that no one's ever got enough money. And the philosophy that says fund the gap is an outdated and flawed one, because as a country, we don't have enough. But what we need to do is, again, bring innovation to manage the gap. And managing the gap says, how do we optimally allocate the limited resourcing that we have as a municipality to ensure that we provide reliable infrastructure services? And that includes, optimal allocation includes, but is not limited to funding of the gap. So that's where we are at a very high level, but I'm sure everyone here reads the policy statements, the DORA bills, et cetera, et cetera. And my last bit on this is what is needed from the sector. I think we need to rise to the occasion, colleagues, as engineers and other professionals, and apply ourselves. We need to be patient with the state. We need to innovate to overcome populism and ignorance in infrastructure development. And we need to understand the client, in this case, which is the state, be it local, provincial, or national, and pitch our solutions at a level that they will understand and appreciate the urgency of the things that we're doing. And our view, at least, I think we're shared in this as Salga, is it needs all of us. But if we're not speaking the right language or pitching our solutions appropriately and doing all of these things collaboratively, we're not going to move forward. So yeah, we hope and we anticipate positive response from the sector and support in building that credible database that allows us to make evidence-based decisions. Thanks, Mr. Morak. I know that was quite fast, but I tried to just touch on the salient points.
Yeah, no, well done. I mean, I think, the message is loud and clear that, as government, there are some initiatives underway, and we'll probably have to look at a way of how we need to work with all the stakeholders to take this forward. Colleagues, I'm afraid we've got literally 8 minutes. We wish not to keep you beyond, we might steal 1 or 2 minutes of your time, but we're moving to the final session, and we are blessed by the presence of Dikeledi, who is the National Secretary for the Cesa's Young Water Professionals, just to indicate to us what has been unfolding from today. Not unfolding today, and then take the processes forward. Dikeledi, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. I am sharing my screen. I hope everyone is able to see.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that introduction. I was tasked with the putting together of all the summaries of today's session. And just a few of the key issues that were addressed, I've noted here from the first presentation that water scarcity, as we all know, is a main concern. And for the urban areas, this is mainly due to urbanization, thus increasing the demand for water and sanitation divisions. And then for the rural areas, the lack of water and sanitation infrastructure. Secondly, I've noted there the challenges that were highlighted also from the first presenter in the master plan, and these are noted as service delivery issues that we have, as well as vandalism of the water and sanitation infrastructure. Substandard municipal audits, that was also a main concern that was noted in the presentations, and corruption, certainly. And the deterioration of infrastructure and lack of infrastructure maintenance, that was also one of the main key issues. Inclusion of innovation and technology, as well as what seems to be the main or a big contributor or a big issue was discussed, political influence in the decisions within the sector. I've noted then also a few of the possible solutions that were discussed. Firstly, we need to improve the management within the municipal sectors, and that is that would be mainly by appointing qualified engineers in the key personnel roles required in those departments, as well as we need to educate the public in terms of the reduction, or hopefully to reduce water losses, and also just create awareness on water reuse. We need to acknowledge and enforce the key roles the key role of engineers in redefining and improving projects within the water and sanitation industry. We need to develop our young engineers, as well as incorporate work from the SMMEs into our water and sanitation projects. We need to investigate alternative energy and power generation sources, and this was in relation to the power cuts that we keep having due to ESCOM's problems. And second last, we need to explore and embrace innovation solutions, and these are the digital tools and softwares as alluded to by Mpho, Zach, as well as Dr. Joe. And lastly, we need to improve our asset management systems by updating our asset registers, as well as focusing more on preventative maintenance instead of corrective maintenance. And lastly, what is it that we need to do in order to enforce or include these suggested solutions? We need to coordinate and governance. We need to focus on coordination and governance, and this was alluded to by Jessica in her presentation, that it's all well if we talk about these, but we need to be talking to the right people, finding out who we need to talk to in order to get these decisions or innovative problem-solving solutions in the right hands. And lastly, we need to follow through on these solutions. So yes, we've had this session today and thought of our problems and how we can solve them, but we need to follow through perhaps at the next session, just to investigate on whether we have indeed taken steps in the right direction. Thank you, William.
No, thanks for that brief summary. I think it's well done in my own opinion. And importantly, that we will avail the presentations and all the notes out of this meeting. Colleagues, we are moving towards the conclusion. So there's one last item in the next 2 minutes, which is the thank you item. I'm reluctant to do that. I think I've been chatting a lot since this morning. Perhaps maybe if I could put Engineer Campbell on the spot to thank the presenters and the delegates and chat a way forward. CEO? You want to say thank you to the presenters and everyone, if you're still in the meeting? Okay, it seems not. I don't know if the president of Cesa is still in the meeting. Okay, great, colleagues. Let me do that. Let me thank everyone who has really contributed towards this particular engagement. It's one of the many, obviously. And lastly, that thanks for your time. You spent literally 3 hours with us today. And we're hoping that whatever that emerges out of here will find expression in what we wish to see in the water sector. Lastly is that I wish to thank Godfrey, who has been instrumental in helping us put this session together, and the team, and our greetings to the CEO and the president of Cesa. And then finally is that there's a process underway for Salga to enter into an MOU with Cesa as a mechanism of taking some of these outcomes of today's discussions forward. And so we wish to thank you for being with us, and it is 1:30, and let's adjourn the meeting till we meet again. Thank you so much and take care.